Joining us now is Representative Mark Green, the congressman serving Tennessee's 7th District and the only doctor to serve as a member of the Coronavirus Select Committee. So, Representative, today we saw Dr. Anthony Fauci appear in the upper chamber. He got a lot of questions from a public health perspective from some of your colleagues on the left and the right, of course. He did get a little bit of pushback, but for the most part, it was a very amicable type of hearing that we saw earlier today. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think, Fauci has a perspective and he has an opinion. And I think most of the time his opinion sounds pretty reasonable. He is an expert on virology, et cetera. However, there are a lot of opinions out in the district, and I talk to doctors all the time. I used to run a physician staffing company, and I had almost 1,000 providers in my company. I talk to these guys all the time, and their perspective's a little bit different. They're out on the front lines, and they're in the front lines in rural areas of America. Their perspective's a little bit different than Dr. Fauci. We used to say in the Army, the folks who are right next to the flagpole, the guys right at headquarters, didn't always have the same perspective as the troops in the field. And I'd suggest that may be the case with Dr. Fauci, too.
Right. And Dr. Fauci, I mean, he's a very smart man. He's one of the best in the industry when it comes to this topic. But it is important to note that he views things from an epidemiologist type of standpoint. But this is a conflict that has very many different facets. There's an economic component. There's a mental health component. There's many different things that need to come into this conversation. So while he does provide us with one perspective, there are multiple perspectives that need to be brought into this conversation. And you're one of those, actually. Yeah. You're on the select committee when it comes to the coronavirus response. You're actually the only doctor on that committee, which is a little bit surprising to hear. What type of work are you guys doing on that committee?
Well, we actually are having our first meeting tomorrow, and very interestingly, it's about testing, and it's basically the Democrat side of the committee lecturing all of us because we didn't even get to bring a witness. They wouldn't even allow the Republicans on the committee to bring a witness. The very first action of this committee, at least from the Democrat side, was to actually attack companies out there that are creating jobs. They sent a letter out to companies saying they should give the PPP back. Well, these were steel companies. Interestingly enough, even Democrat legislators are saying, hold up, don't attack these companies. I mean, these guys are they are so out of touch with what's going on in America. Americans want to know why the World Health Organization deceived everybody for several weeks. I mean, we want to know why China basically was deceptive about this virus, resulting in tens of thousands of lives lost that could have been saved. I mean, that's what we really ought to be drilling down on. And all they want to do is bash the president and, lecture us without us even having a chance to have a witness present. It's ridiculous.
And that is one thing I don't hear very often from Americans is calling for another select committee to oversee the government's response to this. I don't think that's on the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. I mean, you bring up small businesses, and your Democratic colleagues are actually proposing a bill to try to address some small businesses that many of which haven't got their loans yet. They're talking about a second round of those $1,200 checks. I've talked to a lot of people who haven't got their first $1,200 check. So I think there are a lot of priorities that should come first. You bring up China and the World Health Organization, and I think that's important too, before people start kind of expecting more oversight when it comes to this issue. But when it comes to the World Health Organization and China, what type of stuff can we do to hold them accountable once we come over this curb, once we do address the immediate threats to the American people? What can we do when it comes to that issue?
So we need to further drill into the relationship between China and Tedros. When Tedros was in Ethiopia as the foreign minister and the health minister, we know that he covered up cholera outbreaks, et cetera. We know that in that foreign minister capacity, he got tens of millions of dollars from China. They pushed him onto the World Health Organization, China did, and now he's done nothing but basically support China's positions on all this stuff. So we need to dig into that. We also need to dig into why China won't let us see certain things. For example, samples that were destroyed when the virus was initially sequenced. Laboratories that were shut down, people that have been silenced, physicians that have been silenced. Those are the kinds of details and granularity that we need to get into. I heard just the other day that 66% of the deaths in the world would be decreased had China just told us a week earlier. 2 weeks earlier, almost 90% of the deaths could have been prevented. So this really needs to be the issue. No life was lost because they didn't get a test. But what are we looking at tomorrow in the coronavirus task force? Testing.
And when it comes to China, too, for example, yesterday, Twitter said that they were going to take down misinformation that has been posted by other people, individuals, especially when it comes to human-to-human transmission, wearing a mask. And it's kind of ironic to me that those are all lies that China initially told that were parroted by the World Health Organization. And even that is something that could have cost lives here in the United States, not to mention the rest of the world. So I think that there is going to be accountability on those two institutions, that being the Communist Party and the WHO, once this is all said and done, because it's not something that is just affecting the U.S. I mean, there's been people dying in Europe, all across the world right now. So I think there is going to be a community type of response to those type of actions. But before I let you go, too, I want to get your comments on that $3 trillion proposal that your Democratic colleagues unveiled today. They say that they want to move forward to that next type of phase, if you will, when it comes to addressing the relief for Americans. Do you think that this is the right time and the right type of move to do this?
Well, first off, we haven't even spent the $2+ trillion that we've already allocated. So this is if you look at the way they're structuring it, it's all about centralized control. They want to empower the federal government more and more and more because that's who they are. They're Democrats, which is about a half a step away from socialism. And for some of them now, it's almost all socialism. So they want centralized control. Now they're talking about $1 billion bailout for state and local governments because, of course, the federal government should do everything. And that's after we've already given $765 billion to state and local government. So this is just Democrat, progressive, socialist Christmas tree handouts. That's what this is. It's 1,800 pages that we're going to vote on like Friday.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it seems a little bit more likely that it's going to face some more scrutiny in the upper chamber once it gets there. Of course, the Republican Senate, and then, of course, President Trump's desk as well. It's yet to be seen whether or not he's on board with this type of proposal. But Representative Mark Green, I appreciate you coming on tonight and breaking down these issues for us. Thank you.
Have a good day.